I don't know how many weeks it's been, but we've been going since sometime in April, I believe, April or May. So we've been trying to provide teachers with some content that they could use during the pandemic. And tonight we're going to kind of have a wrap up of what's happened over the past couple of months. And then we have our team that's going to talk about where we're going to go from here, what's it look like in the fall. And we hope that maybe we can have some people join us and give us some of their thoughts as to what school's going to look like come September, August, or September. So we hope that you're all safe and well, and we don't have a lot of people joining us tonight, but maybe we will gain some people as we go through this. But we're a little bit late in getting started, but here we are, and we're ready to go. So, Chris, you want to start us off tonight?
Sure. Rich, thanks again for this. This is our 11th episode of Brian, myself, and you. And between the three of us, we've really tried to get out as much information and content as possible regards to all of the environment going on right now. And now we're kind of moving our transition with these upcoming shows more towards what we're planning for September. The time of reflecting of what we've done now has to be abruptly stopped, and we have to really start planning for a couple of exit strategies come September. And it seems to be universal. The three strategies are in person with a lot of restrictions, a hybrid model, which would be half in person, half at home to some extent, and then a full online model. I would think most places in New York would start with a full online model to begin with until sometime in November, especially seeing with what trends are going on now that social distancing is breaking down and places are opening up. We have higher infection rates, so I'm thinking that that's going to definitely come to my highly populated area, forcing us to be home at least in the beginning of the year. And then I would think it would be a slow transition back to in school, possibly elementary first, with secondary and middle school going in later on in the year, probably on a staggered basis. But I would think they'd want to get the elementary kids in as quick as possible to the buildings, just because that is the most disconnect with learning. The younger you get, the more disconnect you have. So I think that's kind of how it's going to roll out here in my district and for a lot of districts around New York and the tri-state area, at least. Upstate, I think, will be a little different with regards to how they go about it. But it's definitely going to be interesting with the particulars. I know there's been a lot of surveys put out there, New York City being the biggest district with 1.1 million students. They are now surveying their parents, and they will be surveying their teachers shortly. And that parent survey goes a lot into how was this experience? How can this experience have been made better for the future? And then if you had options going into next year, what would you choose? Would you choose to keep your child at home? Would you want to send them with precautions? Would you be okay sending them with least precautions? And then also there were some specific questions which were a little tricky, and it seemed like it was worded kind of to give the parents a way to rank their priority. And this is where phys ed came in, because they lumped art, phys ed, and music with two other, one being social emotional and guidance counselors being in school, and the second one being social emotional learning being instituted in school. And then the third one that you could select was art, phys ed, and music being in school. And as a parent, you could select all three theoretically, but I would think probably the way it was worded, they would rank in their priority order and select the ones they thought needed to be most in person. And I think that could lead to some discrepancy when word comes out from New York City saying, parents overwhelmingly responded that it was important to have guidance counselors in school, but art, phys ed, and music could be taught in a remote scenario, because only 25% of the parents responding felt it important to be there in person. So just based on the survey question alone, I have a lot of questions with it and really what its intentions are as far as our specialty profession is. So I think that's something to keep a big eye on. And because it is the biggest district in the country, you can kind of tell by that barometer. Also, they have to deal with, obviously, unions. So it's not just a cut-all situation. They have talked about excessing due to budget cuts, but that is still a lot to be determined.
Yeah, everything you just said, Chris, I echo all of that. I agree with kind of some of your concerns. I know in my district, of course, we go back to school a little bit earlier than you do in New York, but I know Denver Public Schools is definitely planning on a hybrid model. And right now, parents, students, and teachers voted on one of three options, and they're discussing an A-B schedule. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, one group of kids will go to school while the B group is at home doing remote learning. And then Tuesday, Thursday, the B group is in school while the A group is doing remote learning. So it's just an every other day thing. The other proposal was an AABB schedule. So students essentially would get 2 days at school in a row and then transitioning to 2 days of remote learning at home. And then the third proposal was just one whole week the A group goes to school while the B group is at home. And then next week it flip-flops and the A group is at home, the B group is in school. And then they're also discussing the fifth day will be for the students with high needs, whether it's IEPs or emotional concerns, that students that might need the extra support for the fifth day, where the rest of the students would almost have it as a flex day. They would get done what they feel like is most important, or a catch-up day. So that's where we're at in Denver. I know off air I told you this, but I asked our superintendent about what she foresees the situation PE might be in, and she says there hasn't really been a discussion in terms of the negativity on what PE might bring about for health wise. And she brought up choir was the only one for the electives or specials that was brought up as a concern. So again, my guess is as good as yours and Rich's and everybody else's. I know I'm anxious in terms of what it's going to look like, and based on what it's going to look like, how are we going to do our jobs, and to what extent will the students buy into it?
And I'll also say that we had an upstate college that came out, and it seems that, these universities and colleges are coming out with very vague guidelines to begin with, because they're still waiting on approval from the state. So it's really going to come down to when the state approves your plans here in New York, and if they say those are valid plans or not. But the university, Lemoyne College in Syracuse, New York, they're planning on bringing students back in the fall. Obviously, social distancing on campus. Masks are required by all students and faculty.
Yep, same at my place.
Would that be the truth in the school that you're at?
Absolutely, and it's more of the, and I absolutely understand all of the precautions put in place, but the precautions put in place, such as all students having to wear a mask, frequent hand washing, and designated breaks getting put out throughout the day for students to take care of that. The students in a group of, it was 10 to 15 students, but now the governor thinks it could be up to 25 students. But regardless whether it's 10 students or 25 students, them staying in the same classroom all day, especially at the secondary level, really concerns me. And then furthermore to that, I don't know how they're going to decide which cohort of kids get to go to physical education and which students don't get any of the physical education. I know they're planning on shutting cafeterias down so they won't get any peer interaction with that piece. And I know, Chris, you know as well as I do, one of the biggest pluses of phys ed is the interaction piece. I mean, we have a whole standard designated with students interacting with each other and enjoying themselves. So I think I'm going to have a hard time. I'm going to have to get really creative as to how to implement the standards given the circumstances.
I think it's going to be the situation is going to mean that you're going to have to really look at your curriculum, and you're going to have to spend the teachers are going to have to spend a lot of time this summer looking at what types of activities will be appropriate considering the situation. And I think it's going to take a lot of extra work for teachers to really prepare for the fall.
Oh yeah, and it's preparing for something that's unprecedented. So I think tonight when we start talking about, we talked a little bit about it towards the end of last episode last week, getting into really what Heart Tech is now going to have to offer teachers, and that's what it's really going to come down to is how prepared you are, what devices you have, what ideas you have to really track what you're doing now in and out of the classroom. I think it's going to come down to a case by case basis, a district by district basis, being able to prove the necessity of being in the gymnasium because students aren't able to get the same level of education or even level of movement. I mean, at this point, we need to kind of come together as a community, as phys ed teachers as well, and we see all of the requirements that are put on us as far as social emotional learning, everything that we have in phys ed as far as our subcategories, in addition to the skills we've always taught, and now adding this technology aspect onto it. We have to condense as a program or a department in your local areas, figure out what we're looking to provide students, whether it be when we see them in the classroom or the gym or when they're at home. So I know I talked about this with Rich pretty extensively. In my scenario, my goal would be to get my 4th and 5th graders heart rate monitors, and we'll go into really what Heart Tech has to offer for us, and give 4th and 5th graders these heart rate monitors to take home. I'll introduce them through online activities and lessons that I'll be giving them through our online platforms of Google Classrooms. Then through the instruction of how to wear it, how to turn it on, how to use the application and download the data to get it back to me as the teacher, through that learning process, I'm now teaching their families, their siblings that maybe are younger or older and haven't had a chance to use this kind of device. And paired with the lesson of the student for that week would be the at-home activity times that I would require. So, for example, a 5th grader, I'd probably require 3 15-minute activity sessions while you're home. And at this point, I wouldn't care what level those activity sessions are at, just that you're wearing the sensor when you perform that activity. And when you're done, the only check you would have is making sure Mr. Meck got 3 15-minute downloads back to his teacher portal in the Heart Tech Plus system by the end of the week. If all 3 of those were into Mr. Meck by the end of the week, your assignment for that week is done. And now this is just a basic way for me to begin to get the feedback from home of what level of activity can they produce while they're at home. Not all kids are going to be able to produce the same level of activity, even if I'm giving them the step-by-step activities to complete. So I really want to, and this is really getting a little bit more into the abilities of a system like this to really customize and individualize to a student. Because now as educators, we can see what do they have access to at home? How does that compare to when they're in the gymnasium with us and what they can produce when I structure the activity and give them some supplies and direction? And where are the learning gaps and where are the activity gaps in that? And then we can begin to see what our population truly needs as far as my school, 310 kids, and your school, 800 and something, 9,000 kids, whatever it may be. But what does the population need? There might be a population that needs in-school phys ed. And now we can do that through the use of technology and objective data. And it's not just, by whim, who wants to take it in school, who doesn't want to take it in school. No, these students need to take it in school. These students are able to be taught a lesson and then self-directed after there to produce the level of movement we're looking for. So these are the kind of things, by rolling something out in September to my students, I could begin to now build. And now I'm building with thoughts of 5 to 7 years down the line of this impacting us either again in a different way or being a steady reoccurring issue, or now just having more technology at my disposal and have the outreach of phys ed not just be the gymnasium anymore. It's in the home, it's in the culture of the family to keep active, stay active to a certain level. So that's kind of where I was thinking of going in September, and that's really where our talk is going to go tonight. How are you thinking, Brian, with possibilities of data?
Yeah, data. I mean, of course, I've used the heart tech system for 5 years now. So no matter what situation I'm in, I know I'm going to be able to use it. And of course, whether it's remote or in person, I'm going to use it the same. I'm more concerned of what phys ed class will look like in person versus remote. I feel like I got my feet wet pretty good on the virtual learning side of things for the last 2.5 months of the spring semester. I feel like I have a good variety of activities I can assign my students and a lot of written work I can assign. But kind of what Rich said is I've already begun to kind of dug up the curriculum a little bit and kind of separated from activities I think will work in person. But I mean, of course, the list kind of dwindles down the more you think about social distancing rules and in building logistics, such as size of the class or the amount of kids you'll have. I mean, Chris, what's your thought on something as simple as pickleball or badminton? If every student has their own racket or paddle, and you maybe do games of 2-on-2 or 3-on-3, and you like tape out quadrants so students will be 6 feet away from each other, do you think that would work? But then I also think of the fact of, okay, let's say somebody makes a bad serve. Well, somebody's got to pick up the pickleball or the shuttle in badminton to throw it back over. What's your thoughts?
Well, I think if we can have some sort of guidance from the district about a disinfectant protocol, whether it be, I'm thinking my nurses supplied wipes. At this point, everybody's budget has to increase. This is something phys ed should be able to take into consideration as sports would be taking this into consideration. So if there's new procedures for disinfecting sports equipment, that same procedure should be in effect for the phys ed equipment. And I would think it would be nothing more than a level of disinfectant wipe that you can then wipe the racket down if it needed to be changed possession. Or, if it's simply the ball, I believe at the end of the game, you would disinfect the ball kind of thing.
And then I'm also thinking like just being really strategic and really intentional of telling the kids, for example, if the birdie gets out of play, instead of using your hand, just use your racket to kind of as a hockey stick to pass it to whoever you need to get the birdie to, for example. But I mean, it's our instinct, and I mean, I would be guilty of it as well. And I know students will be if they pick it up and it's like, oh shoot, I didn't mean to do that. Then, like you said, Chris, I wonder if at that point, do we sanitize or do we just sanitize at the end of the class?
I think we also need to be not hyper focused about something so small like that. If that is an issue in any way, I believe we wouldn't be allowed in the gym to.
No, that's you're probably right.
So, especially at this point, what did the World Health Organization come out and say? It's not as easily spread as we once thought. Person to person contact, or the likelihood of it is much less than we initially thought.
Or the surfaces of things.
Yeah, I think I heard that as well. So, at this point, if it's going to come down to us stopping everything because a ball was touched, we're not going to be in the gym. I would think worst case scenario is kids are wearing some sort of gloves. And
yeah.
I think best case scenario, it's wash your hands at the beginning, middle, and end of the class. And we need to build that time in for students to be allowed to do that, whether it be through a hand sanitizer or actual soap and water. If they have 3 designated times, and this comes into availability of space, and how do you do that in an elementary school like me? I don't know how I do that. In a 40-minute class to do it 2 or 3 times, that is taking away at least 10 to 15 minutes of class time, if not more, to just wipe hands. So my thinking would be, hand wipes or baby wipes be sufficient? And those could be grabbed, wiped, thrown away. They're not the level of disinfecting you would do on materials, but it is a hand wipe. I don't know, but that would be my first thinking. My second thinking would have the hand sanitizer in the gym, and kids would go over and pump and wipe and then come away from the garbage pail and sanitize. And they would do that 3 times a class. I don't know what would be easier, cheaper, or acceptable, but that's kind of the way I was thinking of building that in. And then if it's built in that way, I don't see how we haven't taken every precaution. And then at the very most, I would say at the end of class, you would have to then disinfect the materials you used. But that's, I would think that's a customary thing that everybody would be doing now.
I mean, I think, because, I mean, me personally, I'm trying to find ways to keep my curriculum and scope and sequence as similar as I have in the past. So, like, I really think I could still do like floor hockey and badminton and pickleball and disc golf and archery. But like you said, Chris, I think the main thing is going to be making sure everything is sanitized at least by the end of each class. So the new group of kids coming in definitely knows, and the teacher knows everything has been sanitized, that's been touched. I mean, I'm even thinking something as like basketball. I would think basketball would be okay. Of course, we won't be able to do gameplay, but shooting practice and dribbling drills on their own, as long as the students keep the same basketball all period, I would think should work as well, as long as the sanitation piece is in effect.
Hey, Brian, Chris, my thought is trying to come up with activities that we can do that don't involve any equipment and no interaction with anybody else. And what the first thing that comes to my mind is something like Zumba. I think dance type of it, and I know that, like when I taught, I wasn't that wasn't one of my specialties. Is the dance part of the curriculum? I always had to rely on my partner or try to maybe bring somebody in that could help with that part of the curriculum. But I think that we might need to think outside the box and think of activities like that. And things like something like Zumba or an activity, dance activity like that would be something I think kids would enjoy as well.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I mean, I definitely agree. Like, I know for me, and again, the enjoyment piece has to be there. And like, but I know like Tabata workouts and HIIT workouts would definitely work, or resistance band exercises in your same spot. But again, I think you're right, Rich. The enjoyment piece definitely has to be there, so students are getting turned on to activity versus kind of shied away or turned off to it. Yeah, I think that's really important. Like even something as like bike riding, I think bike riding would absolutely work as well. Or disc golf. I think disc golf outside, if we got creative and made our own disc golf. I'm drawing a blank, but whatever, the baskets, the disc golf baskets.
Yeah.
Realistically now, I mean, thinking about my current setting, there's very little I think I would have to remove. Maybe some of the real cooperative activities that maybe we ask students to either hold hands, interact, or touch one another. But that then again gets into, are we teaching handshakes ever again in this life or not?
Yeah.
So I think there's some tweaking in that. And I think it's more about the quick sharing of materials and that same material being used by all. So probably the most severe of that would be a basketball, because that would be hand to hand, or a football hand to hand being shared around. So obviously, if you had multiple and enough for everybody, that student could keep their one basketball, or 2 students could share a basketball for a period of time with the whole class. Same thing with the football kind of material. Anytime I think you have a stick or an implement to then aid you with the hitting or the catching of that ball, I think you'd be okay, because that stick or object would stay with that student. In baseball or softball scenario, sharing of bats, I think that would have to be thought about, but that's something that could easily be wiped down after one student, is complete with that. So I think we might not even need to worry as much about this minute detail of disinfecting, because we're going to have the masks on. That's going to be a layer of protection from sweat or spit getting out onto the object. So I think really, as long as we don't have students physically touching for long periods of time or as much as possible and keeping to their 6 feet, anything we can do in that 6 feet would be fine. And even basketball, I'm thinking playing on the court, spreading students out on opposite teams in different areas, and there's only dribbling in your 6 feet, and then you have to pass.
Yeah, yeah.
And you're going to be rotating people into the shooting 6 feet parameters. And, hopefully that would be allowed, where you could rotate 6 feet spots, as long as you kept that social distance. So if that was the case, we can rotate people into shooting positions and point guard positions and things of that nature. So I think we can still do all of our regular, even team sports and skills. It's going to come down to how much equipment we have, how much we need to disinfect that equipment, and how frequently we need to do that. And then once we have the students spaced, can we share spaces within that space, or must they not leave that 6 feet? Because if then they can't leave that 6 feet, obviously it's going to be a little dysfunctional, thinking that I only have 2 basketball nets in my gym. So there's only going to be 2 or 4 shooting or 6 shooting positions available. The rest would be not available for those kids. So then I'd be thinking about rotating every time kids came into the gym, rotating their 6-foot circle. And I'd have them go into new 6-foot circles each time they came as the lesson progressed, to give them a chance with all the different skills and all the different positions in team sport that they would have to discover or learn about.
Well, you know what it's going to come down to is equipment, and how are we going to get all this equipment? So, for example, if you're doing a basketball activity, you're going to need to have a basketball for every single kid. And we all know, we talk to some other teachers and they say, well, my entire budget is $400 or $500 for the whole year. So how are we going to find this equipment that we're going to need, the extra equipment?
Well, and in reality, unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're going to have to work with what we have and be very creative and unique with what we do. But to piggyback off what you said earlier, Rich, is I think coming up with activities that require no equipment will be crucial. And I don't know if you saw my tweet yesterday, but I want to shout out Spark, because I was looking through the Spark curriculum, and as something as easy as they have a unit on wellness walking. And yeah, that seems kind of boring, but I think this would be a good chance to really teach students what lifetime activity is, and really tell them, like, hey, when you're 75 years old, for example, you may not be able to play a basketball game, but you could walk around the block, walk around the park. You could still track your activity, whether it's steps or heart rate, and basically goal set with an activity as simple as walking. So, I mean, I think at the secondary level, I would definitely try a wellness walking unit and teach the students how to enjoy it. You could be 6 feet away from somebody and walk with them and have a nice conversation, for example, and still get your daily physical activity on what's required. So, I mean, I really think kind of what you said, Rich, resonated with me, and coming up with activities that don't require equipment.
And I know my director has even said, in an effort to keep us in the gym, and that's, our number one goal is to stay in the gym if we are, in fact, in school. We don't want to be in the classroom. So then that would be a situation where no equipment is used whatsoever. We're talking, calisthenics. We're talking pure body weight exercises in a designated area for students. And then I would think in that kind of scenario, obviously I'm lucky to have a gymnasium that has a, audio visual setup. So that would be a relatively easy transition for me to display things on there and keep it interesting. And then that's something where, I've seen a lot of People have done interactive things on the wall where students would throw targets at a projected
Yeah.
object or insect or animal. So then maybe we're thinking in the realm of that, or we're thinking in the realm of Dance Dance Revolution again, where students can be spread out on their own dance pads and be able to incorporate movement in their own safe space. And then I would come along at the end of class with a wipe and wipe down that circular area that they were in, or wipe down that dance pad that they used. So that would, I think, would be worst case scenario in my district to keep us in the gymnasium.
Yeah, and again, I know we started off with this topic, but I know everyone is curious as to what reality is going to be and what it looks like for each of us. And I mean, it could look different for everybody based on what school they're at, based on what their principal is recommending, and based on what's going to work logistically with like the master schedule and the amount of students. So, I mean, Chris, you and I might be in two completely different scenarios, not only since you're elementary and I'm secondary, but just because of our schools are much different.
Definitely. And I think we talked about this a few shows ago, where we talked about the funding of the CARES Act coming out. And I know everyone who's coming upon this, obviously after we're done doing this, on the slides that we're going to present today, we have some information on the ESSA and the CARES Act, the ESSA, and this relief funding should be in your districts at this time and should be able to be used by your district to get ready for a remote scenario in September. So this money is out there. I've heard of, just recently had somebody call me up locally and say that just 2 years ago they used the ESSA money to buy $60,000 worth of heart rate. So now she has the heart rate monitors on hand, and she wants to know what she's going to be doing in September with them, and really wanted to talk to me a little bit about what my thoughts were. So I shared the same thing I shared at the beginning, with my 4th and 5th graders taking this home to get that data. So that's the way she's going to go. And Rich, do you think we get to share my screen now? I'll ask to share.
Sure.
Yeah, I wish more people were tuned in. I think this is a valuable, it's almost like an informal conversation, but it kind of ignites people's thinking and brains. I know it does mine.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm thinking too, this is the beginning of really what we're going to talk about, the next gen of Heart Tech Plus, and really what that means for educators, and what we've been working so hard behind the scenes to really get something ready for educators. So this is something that's going to be a succinct system that's going to allow you the ability to be in the gymnasium or at home, no matter your scenario, no matter how hybrid, you're going to be able to get and capture that objective data, whether it be simple step data and distance and step rate data, which I think is the most basic, but also could be some of the most impactful data you can give people. When they can be self-gratified to see that they walked 2.5 miles today just by doing their daily activities, or just by setting aside 30 minutes of exercise time, and that impact of knowing, okay, I did that for my health and my well-being and my self-care. By being able to see those results for not only adults, but then thinking about the students and the children we're working with, is an invaluable motivative tool. So definitely with what Heart Tech is now being able to offer education, I can now take the ability to capture step data at the 1st and 2nd grade level and have the youngest of my students be impacted, whether they're in the gym or at home, and they're going to be able to get objective, reliable step data of really what they did throughout the course of a day or throughout the course of bouts of exercise. So,
hey, Chris, can I jump in here for a second? Can you hear me okay?
Yep, you sound great.
So one of the things I've been thinking about, what we just went through this past 3 or 4 months, how do you as teachers, how can you validate if the kids are doing what they're supposed to at home? Because I think that's what we're trying to do at Heart Tech Plus. We're trying to give the teachers a way to really measure whether or not your students are doing workouts or participating in physical activity at home while they're at home. Did
I-
you have any way to validate that the past 3 or 4 months?
Well, other than just self-reporting, the students self-reporting or the parents self-reporting for the students, there was no objective measure. And definitely no easy way to capture that. There's no other company out there that has a succinct product that will allow you the variability of being in or out of school and still capturing that student data. So everything was self-reported on our end as far as the level and the amount of activity. So I think definitely when we think about, in the course of a week, if I'm on lesson 1 with students and this week their objectives are to have 15 bouts of 3 bouts of 15 minutes of exercise, and then we get that data back, because it is the first experience at home, this is really going to lay the groundwork for what we're able to do in the second, third, and fourth semester this upcoming year and then into future years. So, this is really going to be the very first data we're getting from students at home. In the past, I've done some projects with some accelerometers where students took them home, but obviously never to the heart rate capability. So I'm really excited for my 4th and 5th graders to experience this at home with their parents and their families, because that's where it'll have the biggest impact. But right now, I have nothing objective from my kids.
I mean, for me, of course, this is all on like the honor system, but for me, I always like assigned a specific workout or activity to complete. And then as part of their daily attendance, I had some reflection questions after they submitted attendance as to like, what did you like about the workout? What was difficult? What was your successes? What do you need to work on if you were to do the workout again? Stuff like that. But again, the students could just be filling that out without us knowing whether they did the workout or not. So like Chris mentioned, this is going to be completely objective. It will give us teachers a chance to go through the data, kind of maybe give some teaching points if we see current trends or whatnot. So, just to sum up, it's obvious. This is going to let us know if students are being physically active.
And during this whole pandemic, I think it's been brought to the forefront of the importance of getting outside, being as active as possible while at home, continuing to exercise, not only for the health benefits, but for the stress relief benefits, the mind clearing benefits. Some people, the benefits of sleep that they can get after bouts of this level of exercise. So I think we have everything and the momentum on our side. And if we just really turn to the standards, not only our shape standards that talk about how many minutes per week students should be getting. So right there, if I'm prescribing or I'm asking students at home to have 3 bouts of 15 minutes of activity that are monitored and recorded for me, that's still only 45 minutes in their whole week. It's not 60 minutes a day. It's not 30 minutes a day, 3 times, 4 times a week. The goal would be over the course of the year, depending on how much of this at-home PE takes place, can they get to the standard that we're asking, 60 minutes of activity? So whether, now we would hope because they have the device, they're able to record that and they'd be happy to record that and share it with us. If they're unable to do that or unable to record it, or they're not doing that much and it shows because they're not giving those downloads back to the teacher, then it's not necessarily, especially now, it's not ever an I gotcha situation. It's more of what are your hurdles and boundaries at home that's not letting you participate in, at least what we hope is the minimum level of activity you get in a day. So if we lean on our standards, lean on the CDC talking about the importance of MVPA, lean on the research of what MVPA and high intensity training does to stimulate the brain and the thinking response, all of our cognitive processes that are going through that with the benefits of exercise. If we lean on that and drive forward with technology to help us just get an insight and see a little bit about what the students are doing and able to do at home, that's the most we can hope for now. But those standards, that is health. That is our biometrics. That is our body. So we're not the ones setting that as phys ed teachers. We're looking to the experts in the field, the medical doctors, the kinesiologists, the biomechanics, and we're hoping that those guidelines that they're giving us, now we're just able to report them. And we're able to say, yes, you're achieving that, or no, you need some help achieving that.
Yeah, and Chris, and you brought up a good point. I know we discussed this 1 or 2 weeks ago about that study that came out that we saw on social media about like what the benefits of what HIIT workouts do for adolescents and adults. And there was a nice table of benefits listed that what it does to a person. And kind of like what you mentioned, like 3 bouts of 15 minutes in a way that is kind of some HIIT training. And we will be able to assess that with heart rate monitors and the home app, seeing the data objectively.
And that's really what, Rich has been working so hard with behind the scenes with us, is getting a product for educators in this new time. It's unprecedented, and the ability for hard tech to really transfer all of their energies and efforts from their overall business model of providing educators a reliable and valid tool to collect objective data on movement
Mm-hmm.
and heart rate. And then they switched that need and they saw it needing to be in the home as well. So now with the Hard Tech at Home app that's being developed, that should be available mid-August for full release to all of the existing users. And this is really just a starting presentation to piggyback on what we hope to get off the ground. I know Rich and I talked about it this afternoon. We're hoping to offer a free webinar to all of our existing users, whoever has any of our sensors, whoever has ever used Hard Tech Plus in the past and might think about reconsidering it again. We're going to hold a free webinar online for about 2 hours in Zoom. Everybody's going to be on there. That's an existing user. We'll introduce all of the new features, go way more in depth, hear your questions, think about how you can implement this in the upcoming months in September. Because really, the only value in this system is the amount of individuals using it and having that impact on their students. So any existing users who want to get in contact with you and set you up for success this coming September. So we hope to have a couple of free webinars on that. And then anybody interested in becoming a new user, of course, you can gain as much information from these broadcasts as you can. But also, we hope to do a free webinar with that as well. And there'll be abilities to purchase discounted sensors in those webinars as well. So, and some things also, as we go through this tonight, think about your setting, your culture, your climate, your students, and your district in particular. And I know Denver has some strict guidelines when it comes to this. And really do your research on what you're looking to purchase for heart rate. Unfortunately, the individual I was speaking about ended up going with another company when she purchased her heart rate. Luckily, we're able to actually accommodate many sensors into our system. So it's only going to be a matter of some small additions to get her up and running, and she could actually use her existing hardware with our infrastructure and software. So that's going to really save her a lot of money and time and effort, and be able to still use the devices she has. So if you have devices on hand, get in contact with us, see if they're able to be integrated into our system. If they're not, we may have a buyback possibility for you. But when you're going out to purchase, and if you have funds now and you're looking for objective data solutions, you definitely want to keep these things in mind. It needs to be secure, HIPAA and FERPA compliant. The EU guidelines, of course, that's what we're under now, anybody working internationally. This will be the only complete system for schools and fitness centers and serious users. So you could be an individual user and use this at-home app and have an individual login and track all of your activity, all of your workouts, just as a professional cyclist would do with any of their devices. So this really is innovative, and it's the first system I'm seeing that is so seamlessly adaptable in any environment. Because even fitness centers we see now all around the country, it being closed for so long, how do they keep in contact with their customer base and their loyal individuals that keep coming back to use their fitness facilities? So once you're out of luck and you can't get back in there in person, How are you keeping in contact with them? Are you delivering online exercises? Are you providing them a space to go purchase the sensor and then have you as the instructor give them goals and guidelines to follow during their workouts and give that report back to you, track their progress? If you can't do that as a fitness center, I don't know. The only fitness center I really knew of using heart rate to really impact the HIT training was an Orange Theory situation.
Yep.
But Orange Theory during closure, I'd like to hear from their customers. Were they sending their reports back to their instructor? Were they keeping on track with everything? Or were they forced to go in a Peloton direction? We don't know. But this is going to be universal, no matter who you teach, what level you teach. So that's really been unbelievable. Rich, you want to add anything? Brian, add anything on how?
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I just might add a couple things about the new system that we have going in effect in August. Some of the metrics that I think are unique to us, we're going to be tracking what is the lowest heart rate during the workout. We're going to be tracking recovery both at 30 seconds and at 60 seconds. Of course, we still have the date range capability. We're going to have notifications right through the app, so a teacher could send a generic notification to all their students at one time, a reminder, X, Y, and Z, whatever they want to do for workouts. So I think we're trying to think about, and we're asking you, Chris and Brian and other teachers we work with, tell us what you think would be really valuable to you, and we're trying to put that into this app. We've got a developer that we're working with that's really committed to the project as well and listening to our needs. And so we're just super excited about what we have coming down the pike.
And like we said, this is really for everybody, every setting. Your public schools, pre-K through 12. What's great about here, as you can see on the little graphic from the last page in the bottom right, that's our sensor 4.0. This is a very sleek, small sensor and device. I would say perfectly suitable for 4th grade and up as far as wearing a heart rate monitor. But then what Rich was really getting into is what Heart Tech has really committed to the phys ed community as a whole, and the ability for you as a teacher to just ask your students, even if you don't have a license, you don't have a web portal, you can't do all the features we're going to show tonight, you could simply have the students download the at-home app, sign up with a username and password, and the students can then capture and record that data right there on their phone, and they can send that record of their steps, and it's just the step data. So for this, you'd have to have the device on you. So I'm thinking for 1st through 3rd graders that I would have them either have their parents' cell phone mobile device on them while they either walked as a family, or the student produced some exercise for me at home and they had it in their pocket while they were doing it, just to get some basic preliminary step and distance data. Or they could even have a backpack on if they only had an iPad, and they would have that iPad device. Or, of course, this is compatible with both iOS and Android, so any Samsung device or anything tablet like that would also work. And the device itself is going to capture the steps and the distance and the step rate. But what's great about the application is that it's going to put it into one nice document to be emailed to the teacher. So even me, if I had 75 kids using this at home, I don't have a license, I don't have a web portal, I haven't paid for anything, but my 75 students all have a cell phone. Every day that they used it, they can simply just send an email to Mr. Mac, and in my inbox, of course, I might have 75 emails every single day from the student, but in that email would be a synopsis of what they just did. So that being totally free to anybody who wants to try it out through the at-home app is really, just another way to show that Heart Tech has committed to phys ed in particular and getting data back to the teachers.
Chris, I might add something also to that. A lot of times you'll have a parent that will have a heart rate monitor. It could be could be a polar heart rate monitor. It could be anything that'll do Bluetooth connection.
Yep.
So I know we all struggle with how we're going to get the sensors to the kids so that we can track heart rate. But there's a lot of sensors out there, and your parents might own one. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't have to be our sensor. Anything that can track heart rate will work with our app, and you can send the data to our portal.
That's great. Yep. Just a little bit about what you can find on our website. This is where you can go right to an online store. So if you go to the Heart Tech website, and maybe you have students, if you're a university professor, and definitely we're thinking about a couple of universities right now that might be pushing this out in September. This is an easy way where any of your students or users or customers could come, simply order their own sensor, have it delivered right to them. This is where you could come and find Brian, myself, and the 5-Star team, all of our ambassador resources, some testimonies, what we've been doing, links to our websites and our resources all on there as well. Our upcoming conferences and presentations. Of course, subscribe to the YouTube channel, as we'll be keeping this going throughout the summer months as well. Also, funding resources when it comes to the CARES Act and the different documents given out by the feds and the educational department. And then any at-home health and PE resources. I know Rich has compiled an Excel Google sheet that has probably 50 or 60 Google Drive links to it, just from all the top people in the field on Twitter, like Brian, like Ross Chakrian, like Captain Pete, all those great Twitter people, all those Google Docs links that they've shared for free resources. Rich has compiled that in one easy place, and he can share it through this presentation as well. We're going to keep this as a living presentation to add on to it, just for anybody to review and look at. So we'll have this up on there as well. So make sure you visit the website for that. And now this really comes into a little bit more of this, what our at-home app is going to look like. It is iOS and Android capable. We're logging in. It's Heart Tech Plus at home. And here's some of the visuals you might see with it. So you can see here that you'll have the zone display for an individual that's using it. That's the face of the cell phone. Each of those rectangle graphics there would be, obviously just one picture you'd see at a time. But here's a representation of, as you change your different zones from blue to green, yellow, orange to red. Then you have, your step. You have a bar graph breakdown below, an MBPA. There's a great feature with GPS. If you turn the GPS on in your phone, it will track all of that, just like your Top Fitness app. This is really a Top Fitness app for heart rate, which is, totally free to the user. And then once a license is had by a teacher, an instructor, whatever it may be, then it really unlocks the full potential of the system. And then combine that with the group app capabilities, which we've had for 2 to 3 years now. And those have only gotten better for the classroom gymnasium scenario. We now have a fully functioning system, whether it be in school or out of school. So this, to my knowledge, is the first of its kind. Rich, do you want to add anything about the at-home app in particular? We talked about recovery time, the ability to track all of that.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty robust, and the great part about all of this is the student, not only when they complete the report, the workout, they'll get an email with the results. They'll be able to view that on their phone, and they'll be able to log in at any time to the web portal if they have that license that you talked about, and they'll be able to look at, a day range report over a week, see all the workouts. There's actually a calendar feature right within the app that you could click on a particular day that you did a workout, and you could go back a month or so and click on that calendar date and see your results there. So it's like you said, Chris. This is just not. It's not simple. It's pretty robust in everything we're trying to do here.
And I mean, another thing I really like is the app looks so simple, but yet there's so much going on in the background, and there's so many data points that are getting accrued, and the look of it is really, really, really professional, and something as in depth of a teacher's going to be able to see the minutes in each zone that a student participated in. They're going to be able to see how much MVPA minutes. They're going to be able to see how many points they accrued. So the alignment between that and the group app for students is going to be great because the learning curve is going to be just really small once they start using it.
And that's when you're thinking about, I have some money for tech. I need to get objective data somehow. Heart rate is, obviously leading and cutting edge now, especially the newest and latest and greatest. But are you going to go with a company that's going to require you as the educator to download 2 or 3 applications and the student to sign up on their own to maybe a random website or application and then log in, do those exercises with a device, and then not be able to get the full reporting that you would need as a teacher? So you want to make sure, whatever you are choosing to do, it's right for your setting. And what we really have emphasized to Hard Tech is that it needs to be simple. So this is one app, a student on whatever device that they like to exercise with the most. They would download that app on their device. In my scenario, it would be every kid has a 1-to-1 iPad. Every student would download this device, this app right on their device. They would have their username and login, which would be their same username and login as Google Classrooms, because I would set that up as the teacher in the background, because I can do all of that before any student would have to worry about adding this. So they would simply log in, knowing what they know, and then they would be into it. And when they finished, they would hit stop and save, and it would come right back to the teacher. So this one application and the teacher having one login for themselves to our web portal allows total communication with all data points. There's no other system that I know of where it is that 1-to-1 ratio of user directly back to the teacher. Talking a little bit about then going into our sensors, the ones that we have to offer here at Hardtech to use specifically with our system. And anybody who's an existing user, existing customer, this is all free. Unless you wanted to upgrade a sensor, you already have the capabilities to do this once this is fully released in the middle of August. So there's nothing extra you would have to do other than to be ready to download it yourself and play around with it, and get ready for your students to then download it and play around with it. So the sensor in the middle with the 3 colors being displayed, that's sensor 4.0. I use currently sensor 2.0, and I think Brian has some sensor 2.0s as well. So
yes, I do. Yep.
My students are not going to have the benefit of this 3 light color feedback system that is on this new sensor 4.0, and it's also on sensor 5.0. So that those light changing and zone changing colors, that is exclusively on these 2 new sensors. I don't have that capability. But with the device being right there, my students would put their iPad down, I would think, in their yard. They would do the activity, do the exercises for 15 minutes. When the 15 minutes was complete, they'd come over to their device, they'd hit stop and save, and I would get it as the teacher shortly thereafter. So because they have the feedback right there on their iPad or phone or device, I'm not as worried that it's not on the sensor. But of course, anybody going forward new to our system and would be getting these sensors, I'm in the market of finding funding to make sure my students are outfitted with these, because it really is a game changer. And you can see then below the sensors is an example of a report we would have back to the student at the end of their download. So all the different parameters there, and then they would send that, and the teacher would get a breakdown in our web portal with all those data points as well. So like Rich said, really robust, over and above anything as phys ed that we would do on a normal day-to-day basis without this technology, of course. But now with it, it just makes it so easy. And the way Hardtech has built it is the numbers we need are put in front of our face in a nice, clean fashion, which is what we've always hoped for in a heart rate monitor company. So it's really awesome in that sense. And when you're thinking about sensors, and if it is going to go home, you want something that is sturdy, something that's not going to break and is not flimsy. You want something that's accurate. Think about the technology that's actually in the sensor that gives that beats per minute back to the system. Rich, you could probably go into a little bit more about what the technology inside our actual sensors are.
Yeah, well, our sensors all have what we call balance cell technology. It's a leading company in producing optical sensors, and it's as accurate, pretty close as accurate as a regular chest strap. So you have the benefits accuracy wise as a chest strap would give you without the headache of wearing a chest strap. You can just wear it on your forearm, upper arm, or even on your calf. So there were at one point optical sensors were not very accurate, and people, especially high-end athletes, did not want to be bothered with anything but a chest strap, even though it was not very convenient. But now, with Valencell and the technology that they've developed, which is what's in our sensor, it's extremely accurate.
And if you're thinking about sensors to purchase, of course, in a group scenario in the gymnasium, how long is that sensor going to last? Battery life. I would have about a 6 to 7 hour day, maybe consecutive use, maybe not consecutive use. I know my sensor 2.0s would last 2 to 3 days with that kind of use. And then I have to recharge it fully. What's great about these new sensor 4.0s that we have that Hardtech has to offer now is a charging station. I don't have a graphic of that in here now, but we'll add the graphic as this is a living document. But the ability to recharge all 30 sensors you may have at one time in a short amount of time might be very crucial for you. So think about that when you purchase a sensor. Think about its internal technologies, how accurate that is. We hold ourselves to a standard of Polar. We're all Polar trained here. So Polar is the gold standard when it comes to heart rate and tracking it accurately. All of our sensors are right in line, if not more accurate than what Polar has to offer on the market. So that is, fantastic to be able to provide that not only for our students, but then accurately back to the teacher because we want to have accurate data. Think about the Bluetooth and AMP Plus range. Our devices on the one-to-one home app is going to be taking it through Bluetooth. So all of these sensors have both functionality. In the grid system, that's going to be collected through AMP Plus and the intermediary hub. If you're looking at new sensors, all new sensors should be coming with memory, internal memory that can be transferred back to the device eventually. That's something stage 2 of this new endeavor hopes to have as well for our system. These should be waterproof, and all of our sensors, they should be able to get steps, heart rate, of course, recovery time, distance, cycling cadence, power output. Our sensors can all capture that data. So if you're looking at sensors out there and they're not telling you that they can report steps real time, then maybe that's something you need in a sensor and you want to look elsewhere. So make sure of all those particulars when you're shopping around for a sensor. And then, of course, if one of these sensors fits nicely, and all of our systems have been designed to be used with our style of sensors. So that is, the easiest if someone wanted to add this fully into their curriculum.
And there are also every sensor we have now. Our new sensors are this magnetic charging capability. No more clip. You just clips right on with the magnetic.
Yep, that it has been fantastic. I do have one 4.0. Yep, one 4.0 on me, and it really has been. We talk about a little bit about the license structure, and this is something that's not very new or innovative, but a little bit of information if somebody was new to the product and really wanted to know, I'm one teacher in an elementary school, this isn't for me. Well, no, that's not true. This is for you. I'm an administrator and I have a district of 10,000 kids. This isn't for me. Well, no, actually, this is for you. No matter how small or how large the scenario, our system can accommodate. So think about that and think about your population and what you're really trying to do and what you're trying to achieve and collect. And it comes down to how do we justify for the funding? And that's really what it comes down to. Yeah, no matter whether you're writing for a grant, private or public, or you're looking to your district for funding, or you're looking for USSA or CARES Act funding, it's being able to prove your need for this level of technology and then how you're planning on implementing it. And by having those two strategies before going to ask for funding, I think you'll have a much higher success rate. So no matter your size, no matter if you're one person doing it just for your 25 or 30 adaptive PE students, or you're one person doing it for 10,000 students. It can all be done. And this system is for you. We talk a little bit here about the group app. If no one's seen our group app in action, teacher logs in, everything very simple, right in line with our at-home app. This is what we really used as our groundwork for the at-home app. Below the picture of the tablet login screen are the pictures of the tiles that you would see being displayed on the wall or that iPad for the teacher. So we have a lot more information on our group app out on the website than we do on our at-home app. So that's why this is a little bit more focused towards the one-to-one at-home app capabilities. But you can customize our tiles. You can make changes within the group app. And remember, if you're looking at a team system or a group system that you're going to use in the gymnasium, you would hope that your student data is not going to sit right on that app or that iPad or tablet. It needs to go somewhere. You need to be able to work with that data. So if the data never goes to a web portal and the teacher can never manipulate and build reports for students, then you don't really have the full capabilities you need as an educator to turn that data around in a meaningful way back to whoever it may be you're turning it to. So make sure you're thinking about that when you go exploring for technology. Anything to add about really exploring and what you have to look out for when you're in the market to purchase?
No, I mean, I think you hit everything, Chris. I just think the main thing is what's going to fit best in your program and your existing situation. But I think having one of the most accurate sensors on the market is the most important. And Chris, you just hit it. I think the only point of using a heart rate monitor is to get and view the data at the end. So you need to be able to see that data, and it needs to get broken up into a way where not only teachers but students can understand what each data point is and what they can do with it. So, I mean, I really do feel like we're getting close to having the complete package, especially with having a home solution.
Definitely. And really, that's all I had for this little display and presentation. But one unique feature that we have added into the home app and is then coming back over to the group app is the idea of goals and goal setting. And the system already has a great, robust goal setting. You can set any kind of goal for the students to try and achieve or the class to achieve over a period of time. And then that goal is reported right back to you as a teacher. But now we're looking at when the student achieves a certain goal that was preset by the teacher at home, they're going to get recognition of that right in their app real time when they complete that goal. So whether it be a step goal or an MVPA, moderate to vigorous physical activity of minutes, or it be percentage of time of MVPA, or our system having the unique functionality of points. We have a point system integrated. We also have calories integrated. So with those different goal parameters that you could set as the teacher, then once a student achieves it in their home app, they're going to be notified of that. And being that they've achieved it in their home app, when that report comes back to the teacher's web portal, you're easily going to be able to see, yes, Brian today reached his step goal, reached his MVPA goal, and missed his points goal, whatever it may be. But that unique trophy system that Rich has worked so hard to integrate into the new system, when that comes over to our group app too, that's going to make it even more interactive and really give it that gamification to maybe spark some interest in students that maybe didn't find it so interesting before.
Yep, I completely agree. Absolutely.
Well, Chris and Brian, I wanted to thank both of you for supporting Heart Tech Plus and giving us the feedback that we need to have to make the system better for everybody. And I, as a former teacher, appreciate everything you've done in the profession to make it better for kids. You really are. Both of you are dedicated teachers, and really you should be really proud of what you've accomplished with your students.
Thank you, Rich. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Rich, and thanks for all your hard work to make this technology being able to get implemented in the situations we're in. It truly is a game changer, and I tell everybody I cannot imagine teaching without a system like this.
Thank you. Thanks. Well, next week we're going to have some teachers from New York. Is that right, Chris?
Yeah, next week we have a really exciting show. I know we talked about it a little bit. I probably should have touched on this earlier, but this past week we had a New York City zone AFERD conference. So in New York State, each section of the state is broken down into our AFERD zones. So New York City held a virtual PD, which was supposed to be in person, of course, but then turned virtual. It was a Zoom style session. So Ross and myself went on. We had about 65 participants over the course of an hour. And it was great to be able to, we presented slides, very similar content to what you're seeing here in a very similar way. And then we were able to get feedback from individuals in that presentation. They were able to ask questions through the chat. It was really great. Got some great feedback from it. And then what we're going to do next week is we have, I believe, 3 New York City PE teachers, Mr. Kevin Lau, Mr. Gustav K., and then Mr. E, I only know him by Twitter. I hope to know him more by next week. But these are 3 really innovative New York City teachers that have been paving the way on Twitter with regards to some of their digital content they've come up with, some really innovative ways of using Bitmoji classrooms. So I really just want to have a conversation with them and explore what New York City is really requiring and what their local principals and districts are requiring from their phys ed staff for their students, what they're able to provide their students and offer them, what digital content they've created, and then maybe explore their interest in technology and objective measures this upcoming September and really how feasible it would be with them. So I'm really excited to get to know them a little bit more and hear their unique stories and experiences from this neck of the woods.
Awesome, Chris.
Yeah.
And I can't say enough how important it is that we as teachers connect with each other as much as possible over the next few months, because we certainly are going to be presented with difficult challenges with how we're going to handle going back to school in August and September. So the more times that we can get together and share and have these kinds of sessions, the better we will all be.
Definitely. And
Yeah.
next week technically is my last week of school here. All of New York will be done by next Thursday. So when we have the broadcast with the New York City teachers, I'm sure it being their last day, they'll be very excited to, share the conclusions of how the year kind of wrapped up and went. So I'm sure next week's conversation will be well over an hour like we usually are on here. But if anyone's interested in professional development, you can reach out to Rich. He'll give you a certificate of attendance. Anybody who's interested in anything further, rich@archtechplus.com for emails. You can email myself or Brian. And really, we want to get in touch with our current users, anybody like Brian and myself who are going to be using this in September. That's really who we want to communicate with most now, just to really start to brainstorm. So hopefully soon we'll come up with a Facebook group where we can connect existing customers through there, which is a little bit more personal, and be able to, talk with one another and get them involved with these episodes and learning and catching up that way, and really sharing ideas with how to make it work best for September.
Awesome. Thanks a lot,
Absolutely.
Chris. And you too, Brian. Anything with last comment, Brian?
Nope. That's all I got. But I do think it's very important that our current customers kind of get on board and kind of wrap their heads around what we've got coming up in August and just how drastic it's going to change their program if they decide to use the home app.
Great.
And really,
Okay.
And this time,
Thanks, guys.
good night.
Good night, guys.